Cheryl Twomey says, "Hey, Bill." Hey, Cheryl. New listener here. Welcome aboard. Good to have you. Welcome to the Stratosphere Lounge. You're now official Strata Lounger. Being a conservative teacher means having to combat the loony left stronghold on education every day. I believe you, sister, and bless you for staying in the fight. The battle is tiring, and quite frankly, I'm about ready to give up altogether and quit teaching. I would love to hear your views on the College Board's move to Howard Zinn. I didn't know about that. Oh, my God. It's AP U.S. history curriculum. They're completely rewriting history to downplay American exceptionalism. And there's a link to the Breitbart article. That's really depressing, honestly. Well, you know what it isn't. It isn't, Cheryl. Anybody who can see the quality or the lack of quality of today's students in colleges is really all you need to see. We did a segment on Trifecta not too long ago about how kids in Oxford are running from any kind of challenge, intellectual challenge. And they're saying we don't, the right to free speech is not really important. We have a right to be comfortable. We have a right to be comfortable with our beliefs. We have a right not to feel challenged. These are what college students at Oxford University are saying. We have a right to not have our beliefs challenged. We don't want to be made to feel uncomfortable. These should be a safe zone for us where we don't have to think about anything new. That's kind of not only new for us, but it's kind of new for college kids. I mean, you take, you could go back to the Middle Ages. You go back to when Cambridge University was founded 1,000 years ago. And I don't think you'll ever find a generation that wanted, a generation of students anyway, that wanted people not to argue about things. That's traditionally what the professors didn't want, right? They wanted orthodoxy. These kids don't want anything. And it's a result of how badly inoculated they've been and how badly educated they've been. Because they haven't been educated. They've been indoctrinated. And so their teachers are all the same kind, and they all say the same things, and it's always the same echo chamber. And they're constantly taught about how to feel their grievances and what's wrong, and taught to be victims. And so when somebody challenges these things, these kids get a little cranked because they've never had to argue with anybody before. They've never had to challenge, never had to speak about anything before. And the more that we coddle them, the less useful they become. They're just giant masses of cells, these kids. It's so hard for me not to be enraged at them. I really do have to kind of grab myself by the emotional collar and say, they didn't make themselves this way. We made them that way. We raised them. When I say we, I mean our cohort, not conservatives, because we had more sense than that. But they've been raised. It's all a result of the self-esteem movement. And when you're praised, and you're never hurt, you're never injured, you never have to walk home in the rain, you never have to deal with defeat, you never have to lose, you never have people laughing at you because you lose, you never have to deal with people saying, we beat you 41-0, you guys suck, what about your fags? It may sound harsh, but it's harsh. And one of the many things that I've learned over the last few years is this idea. This is from an anonymous conservative who, and we can't do a 2.0 version of the show without saying, in his amazing book R/K, we're not going to get into RK right now, other than to say, in RK, he says that one of the functions of play is that childhood play allows children to see whether they can succeed in life or not. And he basically says playing in childhood kind of determines what kind of person they're going to be, whether they're going to be a competitor or whether they're going to be a whiner. Because if they can't succeed on the playground, they probably on some level won't succeed in the world. And he's saying evolution is saying that's why children play. They play to find out how good they're going to be in terms of much more serious competition later. It's a really interesting idea. So if you take kids at this critical time of play when they're supposed to learn things like how to lose and why it feels bad to lose and how to turn failure into your friend, all that other stuff, and you protect them from that, you don't protect them. You're not making better kids. You're making much, much, much worse adults. Much, much, much worse. So, I'm so sympathetic to what you're saying. It's just so awful that we even have to have this discussion, that it's even there. I am very, very glad you're staying in the school system, although I will say, let me just rephrase that. I'm not glad you're staying in the school system. That was not an honest thing for me to say. I was trying to say something else. What I was trying to say is, I'm glad you're still desiring to be a teacher. And of all the many things that we might talk about in that State of the Union rebuttal, I covered this in the virtual presidency on education. And in fact, Astrogirl, if you can remind me, can we, as a result of this, can we post the education version of virtual presidency She's nodding, which means it'll get done. If I tell you something's going to get done, I wouldn't bet. Not only would I not bet your life on it, I wouldn't bet a dime on it. But if Desiree says it's going to get done, then it'll probably get done. We were talking about this before. We'll get some more of these virtual presidency segments out there publicly. But in the education piece, I basically talk about homeschooling and that kind of thing. But basically what I say, Cheryl, is that right now in America, there are two ends of the spectrum, and the single greatest resource we have in America today is our retired people. If you take a look at the retired population, they're retiring at the same age, but they're living much longer. It used to be if you retired at 65, the average life expectancy might be 68, 69. You'd be retired for 4 years. Now you're retired for 20 years, 30 years. And as I say in that segment, certainly retired people have earned their rest. And I'm not suggesting you should retire either, Cheryl, but what I am suggesting is that if you were to take a home school and treat it like a school, where you had a building that you rented. You just rented a building like you'd rent a building if you wanted to open a dry cleaning store. And you get together with the parents in the neighborhood and you basically collect money and you pay for the school, for the room. I know you're paying for education twice. It's coming out of your taxes, but this is what you have to pay extra if you want, your kid to be educated. But if you think about it, the salient point here is if you think about the expertise that lives within a 5-mile radius of your house, you think about the amount of experience and the love of the profession and especially the practical real-world experience, you could never get an education like that. Right now, chemistry is taught by, 22-year-old education majors. If chemistry were taught by a guy who was 70 years old and taught chemistry because he was the chief chemical engineer at DuPont for 45 years, that'd be a different kind of chemistry education. And not only would you get the education about chemistry, you get the education about why he loves chemistry, and he'd convey a fair amount of that. I wouldn't ask retired people to sit in a classroom of today's students because they're animals, and they're dumb animals. But I think you could probably convince retired people, certainly for a small paycheck, because they could always use the spending money. You could certainly convince them to sit in a room full of, 7, 8, 10 switched-on kids who wanted to learn. I think they'd leap at a chance to do that. Leap. So I think the answer, frankly, is to get everything out of the government's hands. Just do it. And if you have to pay for it twice, it just sucks. You're just stuck with it. It's a theory behind the private space program idea I have about the free frontier. Yeah, you have to pay $9.95 on a credit card to have a space program, and I know you're already paying taxes, and presumably you thought you were getting a space program through those taxes, but you weren't. So since you're not, can you afford another $10 a month, yes or no? And if you can't, that's fine too. But if you can, we can have one. And so you can take that same model to anything. And you can apply it to education. You can apply it to the American Academy, and set up a 501c3, little local one, make it tax deductible. Fantastic. Off you go. That's what foundations are for. And I can actually pass on some work on that because I've started a foundation, and there's some pretty easy and not terribly expensive ways to do it. But if you ask me what I would do about education, I wouldn't even try to fix the education system. It's like trying to patch holes in the Titanic. It's going down. It's too big and it's too slow. I would set up a system where people could very easily form local networks, and these local networks would be completely voluntary, and they'd all be together, and you get as big or as small as you wanted, and if it got to be too big for your comfort, you'd split off and start another one. That's the future. Small, divergent, quick, local is the future. We got to start thinking that way. We got to stop thinking big. And then I'd have that group raise money and get commitments from parents, and everybody pitches in, and then you hire some professional teachers like you, and then you get retired people to come in and fill in the gaps, and I think you'd get a heck of an education. I think you'd get a better education than you could from the American school system at its prime. So there you go. And thank you for joining us. We're really glad to have you here. Anybody in education, I saw a couple comments come up when I read your question. A couple people in the comment stream here live said, great to have you here. I'm always grateful to have new people in the membership lounge, but I'm also especially grateful to have teachers because it's hard to find teachers. It seems hard. Maybe I'm wrong. It seems hard to find teachers who get this without all the indoctrination. So thanks for joining us, and thanks for staying in the